OSPF default route advertisement in NXOS. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can configure the advertisement of default route in OSPF in NXOS. The configuration of default route advertisement in OSPF in NXOS is so similar with the iOS. We have some options. I will show you these options in this scenario. In this scenario, we have three switches, switch 1, switch 2, and switch 3. You know that if you want to advertise default route, you should configure the command on the ASBR, Autonomous System Boundary Router. In this scenario, NXOS 3 is our ASBR, and I'm going to configure default route advertisement in this switch. And also we have NXOS1 as an ABR, and as you can see, here is area 0 and here is area 1. Let me to configure the scenario, and we will talk about the detail of the default route advertisement. Starting from the NXOS1, here we have one configuration. The configuration is configuration of another scenario. We should change some of the IP addressing information in this scenario, and after that we can apply the commands at the IP addressing to this scenario. First, starting from NXOS1. In NXOS1, we have only two interface ETH21 and ETH22. Let me to remove the ETH23. And the IP address of the ETH21, you should first configure the switch name. Host name is switch 1. Interface ETH21 has IP address of 10.1.2.1. Don't forget to convert the interface to the routed port interface. IP address is 10.1.2.1/24, and we should enable the interface. Again, we have ETH22 with the IP address of the 10.1.3.1, because this is between router switch 1 and switch 3, 10.1.3.1/24. That's it. This is the configuration of the NXOS1. Let me to copy the configuration and pasting on the switch 1. This is NXOS1. Very good. Let's go to the switch 2. This is switch 2. Switch 2 has the host name of switch 2, and also here we have only one interface, ETH21, with the IP address of 10.1.2.2. That's it. Let's copy the NXOS2's configuration here. And also we have another switch, NXOS3. Let me to copy the NXOS2's configuration and changing some value. NXOS3. The host name is switch 3. We have ETH21 with the IP address of the 10.1.3.3/24. And also I'm going to configure one loopback interface on this switch. Interface loopback 0 with the IP address of the quad 3/32. That's it. This is the configuration of the NXOS3. Copy the configuration, pasting on the switch 3. Very good. Now we should configure the OSPF on this switch. The step 2. Switch 1. Feature OSPF is needed for enabling the this feature on the switch 1, and then the router OSPF1. Router ID is quad 1. Interface ETH, we have interface ETH21, ETH22, and also and we don't need ETH23. For interface ETH21, the IP address, we should enable IP router OSPF1 in the area 1, okay? And ETH22 is the OSPF interface on the area 0, IP router OSPF1 area 0. That's it. This is the configuration of switch 1. Let me to configure these commands on the switch 1. Okay, as you can see here, we received error. Why? Because I didn't enable the license grace period. If you are using Titanium, Titanium version of the NXOS, you should use the license grace period. And after this command, you can enable the feature OSPF. Let me to copy this again. Yes, very good. Now I have feature OSPF with the router OSPF1, router ID quad 1, and I enabled OSPF on the interface ETH21 and ETH22. Let me to show you, show IP OSPF interface brief. We have two interface enabled with the OSPF. Let's go to the switch 2. This is the switch 2. The license grace period is used. If you are using NX OS of 9K, you don't need this command license grace period. Feature OSPF, router OSPF1, router ID is quad 2, and we have interface ETH21. Okay, this interface is enabled for the IP router OSPF1 area 1 because this is in the area 1. Let's copy the configuration of switch 2, and here we can use it in the switch 2. Okay, very good. And after that we have another switch, the ASPR. Let me to configure the switch 3. This is switch 3. The first command is license grace period, feature OSPF, router OSPF1, router ID quad 3, then interface ETH21, IP router OSPF1 area 0. Okay, this is the initial configuration of the ASPR. And also we have another interface loopback. I don't want to enable OSPF on this interface. This is an external interface. And let me copy this configuration and pasting on the switch 3. Very good. Now first we should check the neighborships in this scenario between switch 1 and switch 2, and also switch 1 and switch 3. Starting in switch 1, show IP OSPF neighbor. As you can see, we have neighborship between switch 1 and switch 2, and switch 2 and switch 1 and also switch 3. And if you want, you can check the routing table of NXOS2, the switch 2 here, with the show IP route OSPF. Look at here, we receive 10.130 with the ABR as an inter-area route, and this is received from the LSA type 3. If you need to configure the default route advertisement, you should configure on the ASPR. Okay, let me to show you how we can configure default route advertisement in the ASPR. The configuration is similar with the configuration of the iOS. Router config, router OSPF tag. Then we go to the router config router. We should use this command: default information originate. If you have default route on the NXOS3, you can use this command to advertise default route inside of the OSPF routing domain. Let me to show you in the NXOS3. I'm using this command, router OSPF1. Okay, default information originate. Look at here. In the NXOS3, show IP route can show us we don't have any default route. In the NXOS3, we don't have default route. Okay, and because of that, let me check on the NXOS1, show IP route. As you can see here, we don't have default route. This means that ASPR doesn't advertise the default route to the, for example, company. Why? The reason is the ASPR doesn't have default route itself. If your ASPR doesn't have default route, you can use always keyword. If you use always keyword, this means please advertise default route into the routing domain of OSPF, and don't look to find, we don't need to have default route in the routing table of ASPR. Okay, in the ASPR NXOS3, I'm using the default route information originate always. And after that, let me check the NXOS1. Here is the NXOS1, switch 1, show IP route. As you can see, now we have the default route. This is the OSPF receive routes, and this is the OSPF external type 2. You know that this is the LSA type, receive from LSA type 5. Show IP OSPF database can show us we receive now one LSA type 5, and you can use this command if you don't have default route in the ASPR. If you have default route, you don't need to use the always keyword. Also in NXOS2, let me check, show IP route OSPF. Now we have this default route also in the NXOS. So this means that NXOS3 advertise an LSA type 5 contain the default route to the routing domain of OSPF, and you know that the LSA type 5 can advertise from one area to, can go from one area to another area. Because of that, all of the routers of the routing domain by default are receiving the default route. Now let me check from the connectivity of NXOS2 with the loopback 0. Here, ping. For example, quad 3, this is the IP address of the loopback 0 of the NXOS3, and now we have reachability. If you need to, for example, you use a route map here, you can use route map with the name Roadmap can be used for checking some condition before advertising the default route to the company. For example, if you need, you can check the routing table for finding